So when I was new as a coach, I had this dilemma that kept happening to me over and over. First of all, it was 25 years ago, so I looked a lot younger than I do now, and I also had an earring, and I have to say it was a killer earring. It was like a chunky loop, but it looks like there are a couple people waiting to join us. Forget that I have to do that now. So, hi, Eric. So we've got Eric, and I think Michelle will be joining us soon. So anyway, when I would go into these client offices, and they were most of them were 10, maybe 20 years older than me, very successful in their work, and it was like having the same experience with them over and over. It was like Groundhog Day. They would. First of all, I was really intimidated because they were so much older and very experienced, but they would always tell me, okay, we're here and we want to get here. I started to call it the proverbial point A to point B. For some of them, it was our business results are this, but we need to get them here. For others, it was, we have a relationship with our clients that's here, but we need to get it here. For others, it was our team performs this way, we needed to get it to here. But it was always from one thing to something very different. And I started to realize that it was just, for each person, it was the same. People would always call me for when they had big change to make. But the thing that started to trouble me was they would tell me, okay, we're here and we want to get here. But then they could also tell me, if we're here and we want to get here, we think generally the pathway that we need to follow is going to look like this. And they would lay it out for me, and I would think, okay, that makes sense to me. I mean, I may not agree with all of it, but I can see why you'd say that. And then they would say, and the struggles that we're going to have, the obstacles that are going to stand between point A and B look like this and this and this. And again, that would make sense to me. And some of them could even tell me how they got stuck at point A in the first place. And at that point, you may be thinking what I was thinking, which was, why are you even calling me? I have no clue how I'm going to help you. You've got it all figured out. But then I realized, well, they are calling me because there's some question that they have. And that's when I started to realize they knew something that they couldn't articulate, which was that there's a huge difference between having an intellectual understanding of what you want to do or what outcomes you'd like to create, and to actually be able to do it. And the path between, or the gap between intellectual understanding and being able to do something and implement it to produce results was where I realized that's where I need to become an expert if I'm going to be a great coach. And so I started to study it a lot, and because I wanted to figure out what is it that these folks need. And so I became a student of practices. And well, actually, jumping forward a little bit, what I first did is I looked around and I said, who is it that's figured out that there's a difference between the intellectual understanding and being able to do something? And I went very quickly to performers, athletes, musicians. My sister Donna's a musician, so shout out to you, or actors. They all knew that it wasn't enough to just have the intellectual understanding to do something, that they actually had to somehow turn that into action. And the process that intellectually, it's not enough to know how to dismount from the balance beam, right? You can Google dismount from the balance beam, but that's not going to get you there. Or you can intellectually understand these black notes on a sheet of music translate into these keys on a keyboard, but that's no guarantee that even if you can make that translation, that anybody's going to want to listen to you play Chopin. And the reason is because they know that there's a difference between the intellectual understanding and being able to do it. And the gap, that the way they fill the gap, athletes and performers always use the same path, which is they practice. Because they know that the practice is what takes it from the intellect and gets it into your bones. So I realized that I needed to become an expert in practices if I was going to be able to help my clients. And I began to study it a lot. And then I started to ask myself, not only do I need to know how to make really effective practices, but I need to figure out for my clients, what are the practices that they're going to need? And some of them, I've designed thousands of practices over the years at this point, but there were some common themes. And one of them consistently, I've never had a client who's ever told me, you know what, I'm good. I've got enough resilience. I don't need to be any more resilient. Every single one of them would say, I would like to take it higher. And so I began to ask myself, what could I do? And one of the things I realized, athletes and performers know this too. And by the way, you may hear a sound in a moment. The dog is sleeping right here, and Brenda may come get her in a moment. So Lulu may be kidnapped. She heard her name and she sees her mama. Okay, we're exiting the room now. Brenda just was shooting her own video a second ago, so we had to trade the dog. So the pathway that they always follow is practice, is to get it into their bones. And once you get it into your bones, then it can be different. The resilience was the piece that I had to ask myself, how can I help my clients? Is there a practice that I can do for them that would get them deeper into their bone, get it deeper into their bones, resilience? And no kidding, for a couple of years, I studied, I read, I practiced, I did different activities, yoga, martial arts, just all sorts of things. I studied with all sorts of teachers to try to figure out what is it physically, the practice that I could teach people, because it has to be a physical practice to get them there. And then one day, after all of this, I tried and failed a million times. And one day I was sitting in Richmond, Virginia, where Eric is sitting right now, I think. And it just kind of hit me. If there was ever a moment when I've been able to say I channeled something from the divine, that was it. I picked up a pen and a piece of paper and I wrote it down as fast as I could write. And that's pretty much what I'm going to teach you today. I made only one change to it, which is that the first step of 12 then became also repeated. It was 11 steps, and then I repeated the first step as the 12th step again. Otherwise, it's the very same thing I wrote down. In fact, I tried to outsmart myself a few times and teach it or change it, and it never worked as well. So this is it. And I found that it's like a great piece of music. It starts quietly, it gets a little bit louder, and then it fades off. I'm going to teach you to steps maybe 6 or 7 today, just depending on how much time we have. And I'm going to invite you to do it along with me. So if you're embarrassed about doing it along with me and you want to turn off your camera, you can do that. But also it'll be there, it'll be recorded. The reason I wanted to teach it to you though, instead of just sending it to you, was because what I found is when I just send it to people and share it, they're like, do these 12 things. They look at it and every single one of them says, there's no way that these stupid, simple steps could be effective. And so what I find is this session is not only to teach you how to do it, but to quiet that critic, that doubter in your mind, so that you'll actually give it a chance. And then when you do give it a chance, I will promise you, if you do it for about 2 weeks, pretty regularly, hopefully daily, but close to daily, it'll take you about 7 minutes from beginning to end once you've learned the whole thing, that you'll start to see some shifts. And consistently, people do say they're more resilient. Specifically, they say, I'm more confident. Things that used to throw me off, they don't throw me off. Or if I get thrown, I can pick myself up pretty quickly and get back in the game. I'm more calm. I'm more at peace. I can fall asleep more easily. Some people do this before they meditate, and they find their meditations are quieter. So it has all sorts of uses. And another person in Chicago one time when I taught it said, oh, this is like the greatest hits of all the world's spiritual traditions. So I don't know anything about that, but it pulls on sort of perennial wisdom that just works. And it's all going to be around your body. Because if we're going to get resilience into your bones, we can't just have you think about being resilient or talk about it. We actually need to have you do it. So I'm going to pause and just ask, does anybody have a question right now, or what questions do you have before we jump into just sharing it with you? All right, Simon says no questions. So we're going to get started. And if you wanted to open up the page that I sent out to you about an hour ago, it's there as reference. And I know some of you have actually studied this before. So there's two different pieces, two different PDFs that I sent you. One is a one-page summary, steps 1 through 12. And what a lot of people like to do with that is print it out and take a piece of tape and post it on the wall in the room where they do it every day, and then they just have that as reference. There's another more detailed set of instructions where step 1 is like a paragraph or lots of information about it. And step 2, there's a lot of information about it. You don't need to read that right now because I'm going to give it to you. But if you forget later and you don't want to go back to the video, you've got it there. The third thing I gave you is an audio of me. About 10 years ago, somebody asked me to record it for them. So now it's a recording. It lasts, I think, 7 minutes and 45 seconds, I believe, which is pretty close to 7 minutes. And it'll just take you through steps 1 through 12. If you want to just turn it on your computer or your phone, and then you can be guided. So step 1. Step 1 is to practice appreciation. The reason everything I figured out why this works, I figured out later. I just found out that it works. But now as I continue to study, I can explain to you why this works. Step 1 is basically finding something or someone for which you feel appreciation, and it can be every day you do this, it can be something different. But to get yourself into what I like to call the state of appreciation. Appreciation is like a mental, emotional state that you can achieve that, simply put, it's like the friction-free state. The opposite of something like appreciation would be depression, where if you've ever been depressed before, we've all been there in our lives, that doing any task feels like so much more work. It's like walking through mud, up a hill, into the wind. It's just really, it takes a lot more effort. Appreciation is like the friction-free emotion or state. And so it's accessible to all of us all the time. All you have to do is to find something that calls you into that state. So the first step is just to practice appreciation, to feel appreciative for anything. Now you'll see there that there's also the option, if you want, that you can make the sound like M as in Mary. Because like, think of it, if you eat something that you just love, tastes so good, you go right? When you're really enjoying something, a lot of times the sound that just sort of naturally comes out of our mouth is So you can add to that if that helps you experience appreciation a little bit more. And the combination of those two, practicing them every day, will help to sort of heighten your state, to create a more friction-free state. When you're not being resilient, there's a lot of friction in your life. So we're going to pause for a second, and I'm just going to invite you to find something or someone for which you feel appreciation. And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be your puppy. It can be your loved ones, the sunshine. Really, all it is about getting yourself into the state of appreciation. If it helps to close your eyes, close your eyes. If it helps to take yourself off the camera, you can do that. Just feel appreciation and breathe it in. And whatever it is or whoever it is that you're appreciating, just go a little bit deeper into detail. Like what is it about this or this person? Just enjoy them or enjoy it. And if you want to add the sound of it looks like you're all muted, so you can just And you have practiced appreciation. So we're going to go on to the second step now. Each one of these, by the way, I suggest you take like 30 seconds. It's 12 steps. 12 times 30 seconds is about 6 minutes. So you may linger a little bit in some more than others. If you've got more than 7 minutes and you hit one of these and it's your favorite and you just want to stay there, then stay there. But the promise is that you can do this in 7 minutes and be done. So that's possible, just not required if you want to take it longer. The more you practice this, you're going to find you're going to make your own variations. Always make your practice your own. Who has a question about appreciation? Anything at all? Okay. And by the way, just take yourself off. I think you're muted. You muted yourself. I'm stepping off camera to move this for a second because I want you to be able to see more of me for this next one. The second step is then center. And I'm stepping far enough away. I hope I'm not just a little blip on your screen. But before I'll stand closer just to teach it for a second. So center is the notion, it comes from the martial arts actually, and center is the notion of being able to be prepared to move equally easily in any direction. And in the martial arts, that's important because if you're not able to move as easily left and right, up and down, forward and back, if the attack or the strike comes from, let's say something comes at me from this way and I need to go that way, and I'm off center physically, then I'm going to have to come back to center first in order to get there, or go through center to get there. And that extra time to get to center before I can move may be the difference between me not getting struck and me being flat on the ground. So center is really important as a physical concept. in the martial arts. But what they found is as people began to practice it physically, they began to have an inner experience that would change. And I know everybody in here has done enough work with me to know, you heard me talk about how if you change your physical state, it actually changes your inner state as well. And so that's possible. And we're going to just take advantage of that. And that's what they said. When people started practicing the centering practice in the martial arts, they began to feel more centered, more upright in the world, more calm, more peaceful. And all we have to do is to begin to bring your attention to that point of center, which is actually in the Western world, we call it your center of gravity. And to find that, it's also though where all the power comes from in martial arts. It's where you move from. In Chinese, they call it Dantian. And so Dantian is a place, and I'm going to step away just so you can see enough of me. It's just a place just below your belly. So if you're able to stand, you might want to stand now. You can do this seated as well. If it helps, again, to turn off your camera because you'll feel better, you can do that. But I find this center is easiest to find when you're standing the first time. And so if you just take your thumb and put it in your belly button and let it just, your hand drop comfortably, that place that's about the height of your pinky is center, is about the height of center. So center is also going to be at the center between front and back. So that's what your center is. And on women, every one of us, it's different. Women, it tends to be a little bit lower center of gravity than for men, but you'll just start to feel it. So if you can stand, go ahead and stand. If not, you can do this seated as well, but we're going to be not centered in a few different directions. The fastest way to feel, and center is all about the feel. It's not about the intellect, it's all about the feel. So we're going to feel not centered in 3 different dimensions so that then you can begin to find center. So we're going to be not centered first, left to right. So you got this, you can keep your hand here if you want, but you don't have to. There's this center point. And so we're going to start to rock back and forth, left to right, like the pendulum on a grandfather clock. So you go back and forth, and conceptually that if there's a center line between left and right, every time you go, you're going to go through it to get to the right, and you go through it to get to the left. And then somebody forgot to wind the grandfather clock, and slowly that pendulum is going to come to a stop at the center between left and right. So this is all about feel. So don't try and intellect your way into this. Just try to feel the center between left and right. And if you can't feel it, then just this time you just make it up. And now we're going to be not centered front to back. So now you're a rocking chair. So you lean forward, you go back on your toe, or back, front on your heels, back on your toes. And you'll notice if you take your center of gravity beyond your toes, you'll fall forward. If you take your center of gravity beyond your heels, you'll fall backwards. So you can test that limit if you want. Just keep rocking. And then you're going through that center point, front to back, back to front. And eventually, somebody gets up out of the rocking chair, and the rocking chair slowly comes to a stop at the center between front and back. And now we're going to do one more. We're just going to be, and so now you're centered left, right, front, back, and now we're going to go up and down. So let's just go up on our toes, bend our knees a few times. You're going beyond center up to beyond center down, through that center point between up and down, and now just come to a stop at the center between up and down. So initially that's going to be the practice that you do. You're just going to find center. Now, a couple of other hints about that. When you're the front to back, one way to know, am I in center front to back? Your heels, your hips, your shoulders, and your ears will all be in a straight line. If you're seated, then it's going to be your hips, your shoulders, and your ears are going to be in a straight vertical line. Your spine is going to curve, but those 3 will be in a vertical line. Another thing about center is if your knees are locked, if you're standing and your knees are locked, you want to just put a micro bend in them. Because if you want to be prepared to move and your knees are locked, you need to unlock them to move, and that, again, may be the difference between not being hit and being hit. So it's just that little micro bend will help. It also helps with the chi, the flow of the chi, which is another topic, but it's another reason that helps you So that's center. So you should have some sense of that place just below your belly. And then that leads us right into step 3. But before I go to step 3, who's got a question about center? Because you may have. That was a lot of information. It's all written down, but I want to give you the chance to either now or after we're done at 4:30 to ask the questions. Okay, I'm hearing no questions, so I'm going to go on to move from center. So move from center is keep your attention and your awareness in that center point. And we're going to start to turn from left to right. And I'll show you what it looks like. It's, by the way, my feet are going to stay pretty much stationary. And I'll just turn to my left and turn to my right. But, you know, when you did this in 5th grade PE class, you probably turned from your shoulders. Here, we want to actually generate the movement from your core, from your hips, from that center point. So your hips will actually move a little bit before your shoulders. And if you can see that on me, my hips go first and then my shoulders follow. So go ahead and give that a try. Turn to the left, turn to the right. When you turn to the left, your right heel may lift. When you turn to the right, your left heel may lift. Obviously your arms are just swinging freely and they'll follow. So the first thing that the center is always what leads, and then your shoulders and arms will follow. If you start to notice, it's an old habit for most of us. We start to turn with our shoulders, and if you do that, then just stop. Start again and turn from your core. Because in the martial arts, there's a saying which is energy follows attention. And so if we can bring all of your attention to this power pack, through both learning to center and then moving from center, which is step 3, you're starting to build energy in this place. That's the power pack of the body, according to the martial arts. And so you're going to start to feel more grounded, more centered, more confident, more stable in doing that, because energy follows attention. So we started with feeling gratitude, then we went to center by being not centered in 3 different directions. And then we started to move from center, just turning left to right. If you lead with your shoulders by accident, then stop yourself and lead from your core again. So who's got a question about that? Okay, no questions. So I'm going to do a little bit more here and tip this down so this time you can see my feet. I think you can see my feet here. I'm a little postage stamp on my computer screen. For this, we're going to do mountain pose. Mountain pose comes from yoga, and this is about, so if center is about being able to move equally easily in any direction, mountain pose looks very similar, but mountain pose is about being immovable. Mountain pose is about connecting to earth in a grounded way. And by the way, one of the things that happens, I can talk about this maybe in the Q&A, is every part of your body ends up getting sort of activated in the process of these 12 steps. And so now we're activating groundedness. We're still here in our core, but we're also going to rise tall like a mountain does. So really simply, I want to encourage you to put your feet about hip-width apart and parallel. So you can look at them to see if they're parallel. A lot of times I do this with no shoes on. I have no shoes on here. If you ever wear heels, please take your heels off, because you can't. It's really hard to be centered or, connected to earth. If you have shoes on, no problem, but just heels will throw off your balance. So feel the feet on the earth, and now find that center point again. And at this point, you may still be making up. You may be saying, I have no idea what center really feels like. That's all right. You'll get there with practice. You'll actually start to have a sense of, oh, I'm centered, or this is my center point. So from that center, I want you to imagine that you're like sinking roots from your center into the earth, like down to your feet into the earth, to the point where soon there will be no difference between you and earth. Like, we call this thing that looks like this a mountain, but a mountain is just more earth, right? So there's no separation, like, okay, here's where the mountain ends and the earth begins. No, it's all earth. So that's like, become one with the earth, if you will. Now I'm quoting Caddyshack almost. So just connect to the earth, rooting down. But a mountain also rises tall. So from that rootedness, See if you can just invite the spine to be longer all the way through the top of your head, the crown of your head, so that now you are a very tall mountain. And you can even expand a bit, just feeling yourself just huge, like you're this rooted. And if I were to come press on your chest or try to push you over from the left to the right, you're so rooted that it would be harder for me to do that. So that's mountain pose. So we've gone through 4 steps. And actually, that's a really great place to stop. It's 4:30, by the way. I can definitely, without the introductions, the next time we're going to just jump right in and I'm going to teach you the last 8 steps, which is actually only 7 because the first one is the repeat of the last. The one thing that I'm going to do in addition to this is when we're all done with this, I'm going to make a recording of a video of me doing the whole practice from beginning to end. So if you ever want a visual reference, you've got that too. So what I'm going to ask you to do is over the next, between now and Monday, before I teach you the rest, is to do steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 every day. So I would actually encourage you tonight, before you go to bed, to do these 4 one more time. Center, appreciation, center, move from center, and then mountain pose. And you will feel probably more calm. You might feel a little bit more confident. You'll already start, these are, like if I only had one thing to teach, I would always teach just center. So you've got a great one right off the bat. Appreciation is going to just help you get into a more friction-free state. And so I'll say goodbye to anybody who needs to go at 4:30.